First of all, I want to welcome everyone to this webinar, How to Text Clients the Right Way in 2023. My name is Ryan White, and I'll be presenting today on behalf of Weave. A few things before we get started. If you do have questions throughout the webinar, please throw them into the chat. We're going to try to have people monitoring them, and then we'll have some time for back and forth. You're going to hear me talk a lot in the webinar about texting and how important it is to keep it short. So likewise, and in that spirit, this will also probably be a shorter webinar because I want to make sure I'm getting the content out, that it is good, and I'm not dragging on for 30 minutes to an hour, which I have done before, but we're going to keep it short, just like a text message today. And then lastly, if I mention anything about software and you have questions about, does Weave, the sponsor of this webinar, have the ability to do some of the things that I mentioned, you can always ask that question, or there is a button on the top that says request a Weave demo. For those that are joining post on demand after the live webinar, you'll see on the page that you're viewing it that you can ask similar questions and also request a demo. So let's go ahead and get started on let's talk about how to text clients the right way in 2023. And so the first things we're going to talk about 5 main areas on how to really text clients, how to text customers, how to text patients. And it really comes down to about 5 things that you want to focus on and then personalize for your office and your business. 1 is your purpose, your tone, and the voice of the text. 2, of course, the timing of the text is when you send it is pivotal, as well as how do you make a text personal, and specifically, how do you make automated text and automation personal. 4, we're going to talk about it a lot, is less is more. And then 5, the implementation of jokes or emojis in the course of your text communications with customers, patients, and clients. So I want to start off with one of my favorite quotes by Mark Twain, which was, "I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead." And when you think about texting, that is essentially what you're doing. You're trying to condense a large amount of information oftentimes and communicate one thing. And it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of thinking into how do I most effectively communicate, especially for people like me that are ramblers that just like to add a lot of context and background. Text message really is, how do you get to the meat of the matter? How do you communicate the point most efficiently and then send that out? So with that, that's why I wanted to start with, what is the purpose of the text? So the first thing you want to think about when you're crafting text messages, where it's just one-on-one communication or one-to-many, is what is the purpose of this text? What is the main thing I want to get people that if they were to read this in a glance, that they want to understand? If what you'll notice with text messages, if you go in with multiple purposes, you're most likely going to have a miscommunication, or you're going to get that communication is going to be lost on the customer and on the patient. So what you want to do is establish, what is the main reason why I'm texting? What do I want that customer and that client to see and immediately respond to? So because of that, you have different types of text messages your office may want to send, whether it be appointment reminders, whether it be you want them to leave a review, whether it be clearing up something before the appointments, or just following up with them post-procedure, etc. You want to make sure that you've defined the different types of text messages and then simplify the message as much as possible for those different types. And we will go through examples on all of these. But once you simplify the message, that is really when you're going to avoid confusion. When you're speaking face to face, you have the ability to kind of judge and work with someone. You can see their facial reactions. You can see if they're understanding something. And with an email, you've given the benefit of adding additional videos and imagery, as well as really expanding on your message to make sure it's understood. But with text message, you don't have that face-to-face communication, being able to verbally see their nonverbal communication. And you also don't have the benefit of really expanding your message. And so you want to try to simplify as much as possible. Use tone and voice consistent to your office. What it is there's a lot of different businesses, a lot of different offices out there, and a lot of people, a way that the office wants to communicate. And most importantly, some of the advice you'll see is genericized that I give throughout this presentation. And the reason for is communication is most effectively received when it is seen as authentic and genuine. And with that, you have wonderful front office staff. You have people that are greeting customers as they come in. What really makes a great front desk person and front desk administrator is how well they can connect with people. And that is a personal level. And you hire that person because of their skills in that area. And the idea is, how do you have that same personal level of communication, but through a text message? And it comes down to how do you be genuine and how to be authentic and how to be true to your office. So the advice which I give, we'll see a little bit more generalized. And then what you have to do is take that advice and say, how do we make this for our office? How do we want to establish our rules and our tones? Do we use a lot of exclamation marks, emojis, etc.? But you want to make sure you are being professional, but at the same time personal. And then lastly, the most important part of the text message, once you've established the purpose, you've established how you're going to, your voice, is define what the call to action is. We call this the CTA in marketing, which is, what do you want the customer to do with this information? Is it just an informative text? Is it simply a thank you for coming in, we enjoyed seeing you? Or is there an engagement level? Do you want them to respond? Do you want them to click on a link? So you need to have a very defined purpose, and then have a very simple call to action. And usually you only want one call to action. If you have multiple call to actions, what ends up happening is you'll have a lot less engagement than if it's just asking someone to do one thing. So let's take a look at an example of this. So these are all text messages which we have seen from businesses. I changed some of the details just so that they, we don't give away any information. But these are all real text messages that we've taken, and we've tried to find ways that could have been improved and updated. So the original message I saw was, "Hi, Chad, this is Deborah from Sunshine Dental. We've made some updates to the insurance plans we accept, but I've also added some new financing options. So you want to make sure you ask the front desk about this at your appointment tomorrow morning." So not a terrible text. It really is not. They are, seem very personal. But if you notice something, there's no really call to action. The call to action is talk to the front desk about this in the morning. But the question that you have to ask yourself is, what's going to happen when someone reads this? "Hi, Chad. This is Deborah from Sunshine Dental. Okay, great. We've made some updates to our insurance plans that we accept, but we've also added some new financing options." The person's probably like, "Wait a second, what? Wait." So they already have this level of confusion, and they can't really clear it up in the course of the communication. They have to wait till tomorrow morning and then bring that up. And I understand the purpose of this may have been to make sure it didn't feel like they were surprising the patient when they came into the office and started talking about insurance plans. But the truth of the matter is, there's some forms and channels of communication that are more effective in communicating more detailed things, like a change in insurance plans or financing options. And texting usually isn't the best method to that. And so one of the better ways you can do this is say, "Hi, Chad, this is Deborah from Sunshine Dental. Just wanted to send you a reminder that you have an appointment tomorrow at 3:30. Is this still good for you?" So as great as it is to let people know about your new financial options, which you are adding to your office, or you're changing insurance plans, really those communications may be done better face to face, where you can really outline the information, they can ask questions, and you can make sure that there's no misunderstanding. But there's even a better way to do this. Let's go to the next one. "Hi, Diana. This is Pearl. This is Pearl Ophthalmology. We enjoyed getting to know you today. Thank you for picking us for your vision care." I actually really do like this text. I think this is great text, but the context of it is a little unique. This was sent out to a new patient, which is great. I like it. They seem genuine. I do like the acknowledging the patient and the customer. I didn't feel like they were selling anything. But I think because this was a new patient text, that it really would have been beneficial if you had to define call to action and try to get them to engage with you. And so, "Hi, Diana. This is Jenny from Pearl Ophthalmology. Thank you for coming in today. We enjoyed getting to know you better. Please let us know how we did by clicking the link below." Now, you'll notice that this one got a little bit longer than typically than the text message above, which I don't love, but it is a new patient text message, and they really could benefit from having that defined purpose of sending it, as saying they really got to get that feedback from the new patient. They want to get them engaged and let them know how they did, and therefore use that feedback to improve their practice. Okay, so let's get back to the next area, which is timing. Now, everyone knows the phrase "timing is everything," and there are definitely acceptable times to send text messages, specifically with automations. It's really easy to just set your automation and forget it in more of a succinct, "Hey, send it on this day," and then the computer sometimes will send it on a various time, and you don't actually outline the time. So you want to make sure it's usually done typically in a business hours or in a time in which you can respond. And the reason why that is important is 95% of text messages are read within the first 3 to 5 minutes. And specifically, if they're going to respond, typically it's going to be within those first couple minutes after reading the text message. And so if you're sending these messages out and then they are responding, but then it's hours and hours until you respond back. That's where you're going to lose some of the real power of text messaging. On They have a question, they have a quick communication, they're able to send it at their convenience, and then you get a response back. But the quicker it is, you'll see the more engagement, and that's where they feel like you're really reaching out and you're answering their questions. You're engaged with them as much as they are engaged with you. Now, the other thing about timing, we have seen that there are some people that delay text messaging until later in the day, and they find that most people are on the phones between 9 and the most frequent times on the phones is between like 8 and 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. So you will get those text messages that come in late. But really, it comes down to, do you have systems in place so that you can answer those text messages quickly and available if possible? Or if they text you, make it feel like it's not going into the void. With automated text messages specifically, there is some concern about frequency. So be aware of how frequently you're sending text messages to a patient, to a customer, specifically with appointment confirmations. These are ones that's been a big debate for the last couple of years, is how many of these do you send? And really the answer is, depends on who your demographic is. It depends on your patient base. It depends on your area. So being able to ask those questions, follow up with patients, figure out how they feel it was beneficial, if they had two appointment confirmed versus one, versus three, versus five, etc. And the problem with this is that texting isn't the only way you're communicating with them. Often they also are getting emails and phone calls. So what I've seen with frequency, especially with appointment reminders, is one of my favorite ways is I do an appointment reminder right at the point of setting the appointment. That way they get a quick reminder, they set the appointment, they can put it in their calendar. And then I typically like to do about 2 weeks to a week before the appointment, and then about a day and a half before the appointment. But what you want to make sure is that if they respond and engage, then you shut off the automation. If they've already engaged, you don't want them to keep getting text after text after text reminding them. They're like, yes, I know, I've got the appointment tomorrow. They don't want to come in all annoyed, like, oh, you guys just wouldn't stop bugging me. I knew I was going to come in and you guys kept calling. However, you are going to get customers and patients that don't respond. And so that's where you have a question of, how many text messages do I really send them? If I've sent them 2 text messages and they're not confirming to the appointment, maybe it is time for a phone call, or maybe it's time for an email. You hit them from a different channel. That way they don't feel like they are being bombarded from the same channel over and over again. So let's talk a little bit more less about timing and purpose, and now, how do you make it personal? Now, the most effective communication is when it is personal, when it is authentic. That is when it's received the best way. With a text message, though, it gets a little bit trickier. So one of the first things I always tell offices is know your patients and their communication preferences. You'll see that you may have a wide demographic of people that you serve. And there are many patients that may, in fact, want and prefer text messaging, and then there's those that don't. So make sure you're constantly asking your patients, you're following up with them, and you're saying, hey, let us know. Do you like the emails? Do you like the newsletter? Do you like the text messages? And also asking, what is their preferred method of communication? As well as, obviously trust what they're going to say, but see how they engage, because they may say they like this method, but they happen to always engage better with text messages, despite saying they don't prefer that or they don't like it. So make sure you're not only listening to them, but you're also seeing which way are they engaging the best. So now, personalization, especially when it comes to text messages, you don't have a lot of room. So one of the best ways is to make sure you are using their first names when possible. Make sure you know that you are actually reaching out as a person to them, and it's not a robot reaching out or an automated text. So one thing, it's a very simple thing, but it's so often avoided, or so many offices actually forget this step. And it's just that other additional step that you can add frequently to make the communication seem more personal. And also, how do you make it more conversational? And that is, how often do you implement questions into your text message? How do you make it simple and something that you would say in a conversation? If you're reading the text message and you're like, this is not something I would say in a face-to-face conversation, ask yourself why. Is there a way I can tweak the messaging? Can I tweak the way I'm saying it so that it sounds like it's something I would say in person? Remember, text message is really just a short conversation, just like we're having, just as if you're having someone face to face. It just happens to be through a different channel. So you want to make sure that you're being cognizant of that and making it personal, making it conversational, and it doesn't sound like it's legal letter or anything of that nature, that it's actually a very simple communication platform. So with that, you want to make it personal, you want to make it conversational, but the question is that takes a lot of time. And there's often certain amounts of information you're continuously sharing over and over and over again. The details may change slightly, like the person that you're sending it to, or maybe the change in the appointment time or the procedure, etc. But the meat of the information tends to remain the same. And that's where you really want to make sure you do have conversation templates. Now, when I was talking earlier about what is your voice, what is your brand, what is your tone of the office, this is where this really comes into play, because as you define your tone, you define how you want to communicate with your patients and with your customers, that's where you can put those into these conversation templates. Then you have these conversation templates that a lot of softwares are able to use, and just basically you can replace the name, replace the details, but you at least have the starting point, and you can then customize it from there. And you'll find that is one of the best ways to save time with text messages. The wonderful thing about texting is, compared to a phone conversation, it can save a significant amount of time, especially if there's easy, simple information you're just trying to continuously send out to customers. Getting someone on the phone takes a lot of time. You've got to dial them up, call, wait until they answer. Chances are they're not going to, because in this generation, really, the phone is like a seldom used app on your phone. At least that's how I see it. Or a lot of times it's like, oh, text me first to see if I'm even taking phone calls. So that's a lot of time you've invested to try to get something out by phone. And so that's where texting comes really in handy and can save you time. And even more so if you already have these messages drafted and now you just have to customize it. So that gets us to our last point: automated but personal. How do you make automated communication personal? It is hard. This is tricky. And this is something that it can be done. But it's something that does take effort, and it takes effort in the beginning. But then after you get it running and those automations moving, then you really start to reap the benefits. And then you start saying, wow, your office was communicating me. And chances are they may know it's an automation, but ultimately it did sound like it was personal. That person crafted that message, and that they know it is coming from the office in a personal way. So the automated communications you'll see often are appointment reminders, birthday or anniversary messages, maybe review requests, new patient paperwork. We're going to go through some of those. So don't make that automation obvious. If it looks like a robot is sending a text message, chances are that's not the best text message. Here's one I saw. Hello, please reply yes to confirm your appointment at 11 a.m. on May 3rd at Farkoff Partners. Obviously, they get the information across. They will have a call to action, which is confirm, and they get the message at simplified, which is at 11 a.m. But the problem with this is it doesn't feel personal. It feels like it was sent from a robot. So let's look at an improved version of this. Hi, Blake. This is a reminder that you have an appointment on May 3rd at 11 a.m. with Farkoff Partners. Respond C to confirm. Great. This actually looks more personal, but that call to action, respond C to confirm, this is where it starts hinting at, like, is there a person that's going to receive this text message, or does this go to a system? So that's why I like this last one a little bit better, which is, hi, Blake. This is Rhonda from Farkoff Partners. I just wanted to remind you of your appointment May 3rd at 11 a.m. Does that still work for you? Now, the beautiful things about a lot of these softwares that you can send text messages through is you can have a whole variety of answers that you can just, in the one before where it's respond C to confirm, you're basically telling what answer you want, and therefore it confirms in the system. But with a lot of these new softwares, you can program those answers, and they actually have them pre-programmed on. If they say, yes, that works, or anything that looks affirmative, they automatically move that forward as if they were to say responding C to confirm. And so that way it allows you and empowers your office to make this more personal. Does that still work for you? If there's a simple yes in there, it's going to confirm the text message, but it also allows you to have potentially a conversation, because they may say, yes, that works for me. And they may ask a question. See how this invites a conversation. The first generic one does not. It's saying, or even the improved one, it's not really inviting a conversation. It's just sending out the information. But this last one invites the conversation, invites that more opportunity for patient and customer engagement, which is so pivotal in 2023, because customers are looking to engage with their businesses, and they want to be engaged with their patients, with their office, with whether you're a dental office or, dental office or audiology, anywhere. They're looking to engage with the office specifically. So let's get to my favorite point. Less is more. This is really hard for me personally because I am one that I love to get on my soapbox and I'll pontificate till the day is over. And even now, when I look at my text messages, I was going to share a screenshot of a recent text message just 2 days ago, and it was 160 characters. It was long. It had counterpoints, and I love full sentences and I love periods. And I've struggled with using abbreviations like "you are" for "your," and it's just always been hard for me. And so I try to take this point and I preach it because this is something I need to work on. And so when I try to do business texts, I really focus on how do I simplify this? Simple to the point. Now, different phones have the ability to have different character limits. You'll see 160 is often a usual character limit, but different carriers have different visual results. So even though they may have a 160 character limit, it may break it up into two different text messages, or it may cut off half the text messages with like a read more option. And so the longer you get those text messages, you may end up losing that information, or unless they are engaging with it, they don't see half of the message unless they click in and say read more, which then opens up and allows them to see the full message. And so the best way to combat that is make it simple to the point and don't try to take it to that 160 character limit. If you have multiple different information points or different pieces of information you have to share, think about breaking up the text. Maybe you send one, wait till they respond, and then you send the other. That just makes it a little bit easier so that they aren't losing several points within just one text. And lastly, pictures are worth 1,000 words. If you can ask them to send a picture, so much easier. I'm going to show an example of that. So this is one I saw not too long ago. Hi, Jake. This is Flo from Dr. Wright's office. We are having some trouble verifying your insurance information. Would you please send us the following: provider, group ID, member ID. Also, we'd love it if you left us a review. Click on the link below. Thank you. So right away, you should be looking at this, be like, "Ugh, that's a lot." You're asking the customer to do a lot of things. One, they have to send the provider the group ID. They have to go and find their insurance information. And then after that, they have to, find all those different various points, type them out, which is terrible for me and my generation. But then after that, you also ask them to leave a review. Now they may be a nicer person than I am, but if I was asked to do all these things and then leave them a review, I'd be like, ugh, well, this office was great, but I still have that kind of negative experience, that's very recent. And I have that recency bias of I had to do all this work. And so therefore that may impact my review. So you're asking do a little bit too much. So let's look at a better version. Hi, Jake. This is Flo from Dr. Wright's office. We're having some trouble verifying your insurance information. Would you please send us the following: provider, group ID, member ID. So really, the improved version of this is they dropped that last call to action to leave a review, which is still good, but let's send a picture. It's so much better. Hi, Jake. This is Flo from Dr. Wright's office. We are having some trouble verifying your insurance information. Can you send us a picture of your card? Now, I talk to customers about, I would say, almost every week, several customers a week. And one of the things that they've been really bringing up recently in this last year is the use of pictures in text messages. It makes things so much easier, and it's become such an easy way to communicate information. I have one office that loves to just send pictures on how to get to their office because they're in a little bit of a complicated spot, and it's a little bit hard if they send a text message. It's like, hey, turn left here and then turn right here. They just send a picture. It says, hey, boom, this is where we are. Make sure you park over here. I have other offices that they often work with their patients and they say, hey, just send us a picture of your prescriptions, and then that way we can make sure we have all that information ready for you. Or, in this case, send a picture of your insurance card and then they can verify it and get all that information. You're not asking them to go in and type it. They just have to snap a quick picture. And if you're using a software system that actually can integrate pictures into the text messaging platform and make it so you're just doing everything from the computer anyways, this simplifies everything. And so when possible, use imagery. Okay, which now brings us to jokes and emojis. Now, we go back to the crux of the conversation is how do you have a personal communication? What is your style? What is your tone? Have you defined your office as a specific tone? Now, this is one that you will need to decide as a whole office altogether is how do we want to use punctuation? Do we want to have a lot of exclamation marks? Do we want to use a lot of emojis? Are we willing to do jokes? Now, the important thing is if you read articles about jokes and emojis, they always say in a business sense, be very conservative, which tends to say no joking, which I don't know how much I agree with that. I think you can have jokes and you can have personal authentic communication that implements jokes. It really just comes down to, does this feel authentic? Does this feel real? And or the risk of can this be misinterpreted? And what is that risk if it is misinterpreted? Risk of misinterpretation is something you do have to factor in. This is a text message. There are, sarcasm is really hard to read through text message, which also is probably not the best type of joke to be doing over text. So just make sure that there isn't a giant risk of misinterpretation, as well as matching the personality and the communication style of the person you're working with, the patient. If they are a fun, joking person, absolutely match that. If you don't know their personality, I've done a little bit of stand-up work in my past, and it's a lot of fun, but the one thing I have learned is you have to know your audience. And if you go out there with a joke you really like, but you have no idea what the audience is like, you can find that joke will bomb. And so knowing who your audience is, knowing your patients, knowing your customers, and if they're going to accept this, and this is something that will actually benefit the conversation, that will benefit the engagement, then absolutely it's great. As well as the timing. I actually saw a great text where the person had a procedure done. A lot of basically they had to go under, get a huge procedure done. Still had a lot of pain medication. It was just a very lengthy procedure. And then immediately afterwards, is like, "Thank you for coming in. I hope you enjoyed your day." And so it was kind of done jokingly, but it was also the timing of that joke may not have been the best because they were coming out of the surgery and they were still feeling, and that pain was still very real to them, which the office did cause, but obviously for their health. So make sure that the timing of the joke is important, as well as the emojis. And the one thing I do want to focus is, as a lot, people will read articles on like the implementation of emojis and how it is important to work with, this demographic or this generation, etc. But if it feels forced, it's not going to be received well. So make sure that it doesn't feel forced, that it feels natural. And it may be that the patient, the customer, actually responds with a lot of emojis, uses them a lot. Then that's a great time to implement it. It feels more personal, doesn't feel as forced. But for me, as a person who's still, I think I've maybe sent 15, maybe 20 emojis by a text in my life. I feel like the people I know knew that if I sent a text, it would be very forced with an emoji. And so it's not my style. But I am very willing to, if it comes to the point of, is that how the customer communicates and that's how they get their information? But I'm also not at the same time going to match them completely. I'm still a person. I choose my communication method, and your office is the same way. How do you communicate? How do you want to communicate? Are you one that uses a lot of automation or uses a lot of emojis? Is a great text I saw. Hi, Copa Vita text. What are your hours today? We're open from 6 to 3 p.m. today, and then a nice little happy. Thank you. And you notice right here, I love it because they're actually the one that initiated the emojis. Kind of the beautiful thing about emojis and jokes is they can lighten the situation. They can make it a little bit more personal in the sense that it feels more fun, feels more light. And just doing that, hey, we're open from 6 to 3 p.m. They could have just sent that information, but by adding that emoji, it felt like, hey, we're happy you sent the text message. Sometimes people have a hard time reading your tone through text. And so emojis is a tool to try to add a little bit to that so that people can see you have a happy tone. And it's not just generic and informational. And you see immediately after that, the customer responds, thank you, and adds their own little emoji. So they kind of match that same tone, which is a great engagement opportunity. And so when you're using emojis in text, one, look if they're using it, or two, will this add to the conversation? Will it benefit an emoji making this conversation, but potentially adding to a specific level of the tone, whether it's a happy face or a heart, thank you so much for coming in, etc. So we talked a little about those rules on how to do a text. Now let's talk about when texts fail. There are 3 areas, and these are all real texts that I saw. And let's talk about them. Throw them in your chat if you have an idea on why you think any of these texts was not a good idea. The first one is, if it looks like spam, people won't respond. There are a lot of automated text messages. I've talked about in other webinars, the dramatic increase in robocalls over the last couple of years. Well, the truth is that's just shifting to text messages. And you're going to see that more and more in the next 5 years, that you're going to get more and more spam text messages and or spam outreach. And what you're seeing is, if you send a text message that looks super generic and or doesn't feel like it's connected, and it doesn't give enough information of where it's from, which is why I talked about it's so important to include their name. It's so important to include your business name, is if you don't, it can look like this first text. Please use the link below to pay your invoice. Okay, great. Who is this? Chances are the customer or the patient does not save your number. They probably don't put you in their phone as this is the doctor's office. They probably just, I've had interactions with you and they can recognize that in the past. Now, hopefully this isn't the first and only communication you send to them by text, and so that they just receive this text out of the blue, but it's still important to use that first name. So we'll see that in the next slide. The other one, this is hard for me. I'm not going to lie. Looking at this text, this is something I probably would have sent a couple of years ago. And I probably have sent even, up to this last week without even realizing it. That's how I start typing it out. Hi, Misty. This is Sandy from Greater Pittsburgh Dental. We're excited to see you tomorrow. I want to fill you in on a few things you should know about our office. One, please be sure to be 15 minutes early to ensure we get all the paperwork completed. Two, remember to bring your insurance information. Three, payment is due at visit, so bring your credit card out. Another form of, and actually it kept going on, and all I saw was the read more. So once again, I saw the character limit and the read more. So the purpose, I can see the purpose of the text very clearly. They want to send this out before the visit to make sure that their patients come prepared. The problem is there's just so much information here that it makes it hard to read. And you think of text message, back to that quote in the beginning with Mark Twain, I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one. You can figure out, and it takes time to, how do you condense the message so that I'm not adding additional fluff? How do I make it efficient? And then lastly, bad timing. Hi, Ryan. This is Judy from Farside Optical. We want to remind you of your appointment in 4 weeks on February 9th at 10 a.m. Please reply yes to confirm. Now, there's arguments on this end on, is this really bad timing? But the truth is, the matter is, this is a month out. And this was a text actually sent to me. I changed the name of the optical, so I didn't want to get them out. But I'm still a month out to the appointment. And yes, that's my intention to go, but I think it still was a little bit too early for me to confirm. There may be a couple of things that come up in the next course of the month. They'll have to make sure that I would change it. I don't want to say yes to confirm and then have to call a couple days, later and be like, oh, actually this came up. Can I switch times? The best way to do that is just to make sure that you're informing them of the information. So let's talk about how do we improve these. So one, when it's looking like spam, use their name. Hi, Maurice. Thanks for coming in today. Use the link below to pay your invoice from the appointment. So you can see there's context behind that text message. It's not just a random link that people may see as spammy. Novel worthy. This one was hard. Hi, Misty. This is Sandy from Greater Pittsburgh Dental. We are excited to see you tomorrow. Please be 15 minutes early and have your insurance information ready. So they had a lot of 1, 2, 3 points, which you can still include and potentially in additional text. But ultimately, how can you condense it and get it to something manageable and readable? And lastly, the bad timing. Hi, Ryan. This is Judy from Farside Optical. You have an appointment scheduled on February 9th at 10 a.m. We will reach out a week before to verify. Thank you. So this one is obviously they understand the customer a little bit better, that they know that they want to confirm the appointment. Obviously, it's in the best interest of the business to confirm the appointment. But at the same time, they realize, how do you confirm an appointment 3 months out? Or 6 months out, 1 month out? That time frame will be different for every patient. So the way they try to mitigate that is obviously sending out the text message, keeping it top of mind will help decrease the chance of no-shows or cancellations. But at the same time, they realize that the really confirming the appointment, really when it is the most value, is when it is for sure the customer or the patient is confirming. And for me, a month out was still a little early to confirm. So they're just going to reach out in the future. So, as promised, I'm going to try to keep this short to the point. Thank you for attending. If you have any questions, please send them in the chat. Let's go ahead and look at these. It looks like we did see some questions in chat. Okay. Are messages with emojis more likely to be flagged as spam by carriers? That is a great question. Yes, if they have an excessive amount of emojis, there actually has been shown that they can be flagged by carriers. However, the inclusion of a emoji actually will not have it. They don't tell you the exact rules that they follow, but if you are using an excessive amount of emojis, yes, that can be flagged as spam. So that's also something to consider. If you're using more than 5 emojis in general in a text message, I wonder why, personally. But at the same time, you do run that risk of it being flagged. With sending a picture of insurance card compromise personal notifications and violate HIPAA? That is a great question. It really depends on your carrier if you're HIPAA compliant, but ultimately, as you know, with HIPAA, it really comes down to you can have HIPAA compliant software and HIPAA compliant tactics and strategies, but at the same time, it's up to you as the user to use it in the wrong way. And so just making sure that you do have a carrier that is HIPAA compliant. Let's see. There's one other one that I saw here. Does Weave have something showing you your character count? I have not noticed before. There's a lot of softwares that will keep the notice of the character count. I don't know if specifically, I'll have to get back to you on that one. But ultimately, the best way to do this is look at the message and say, can I see the crux of this message within a second or two, within 3 seconds? If you can see it within 2 to 3 seconds, then it's fairly, you feel like, okay, I've gotten the point down to at least simplicity, that the message is easily received. If you happen to read for 5 seconds, you can look at your character limit, but the chances are you've already gone far too long. That's probably my best advice for you. But yes, use character counts, especially for templated messages. That's the most important. What about text signature? Any recommendations? Really, text signatures are great depending on your clientele. If you're working in a, depending on your office and your demographic, I like them, have liked them in the past. However, when it comes to one-on-one engagement, especially post-appointment, when you're just reaching out saying, hey, thank you so much for coming in today. Do you have any questions? I think the signature gets in the way of the conversation, because then it ends up, you get that crux of the message, and then there's an additional message underneath that actually does not contribute to the conversation. So to new patients, absolutely, it's great. But it depends on what is my engagement, and does this contribute to patient engagement and the engagement that I'm looking for, or does it take away from it? That should be the question you ask. Okay. All right. Looks like those are about all the questions I have today. And oh my gosh, it's 10:35. I promised I would be short and brief, but brevity has always been my weakness. And so if you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out. There also, if you have additional questions about the software that I mentioned, as I mentioned, you can go to the Request a Weave demo if you're joining live, or if you're here viewing, just getweave.com/demo. Ultimately, it comes down to be smart in your communication, be personal and authentic. If you're not going to say it, and if that's not the way you're going to say it to someone face to face, or at least remotely close to it, evaluate it. Is that the best thing or best way to implement it with a text message? Texting is very powerful, but once again, it's just another channel of communication. The power of communication really comes from the communication itself, the authenticity. Thank you so much for joining. I'd love to see everyone here. And if you have additional questions, please let us know and reach out to get a demo. Thank you.